Nearly everything around it has changed, but Flinders Street Station still stands proudly as a symbol of Melbourne's past. While the Edwardian-style building is not the first to stand on this site, there remains a history spanning 171 years. This is Melbourne's busiest train station, and for a time in the 1920s, it was the busiest train station in the world. In today's video, I'll be exploring the history of Flinders Street Station, including the first station that stood in its place, its construction and design, including an 1883 design competition, and an urban legend that the design was intended for Mumbai, demolition threats and renovations, including some wild proposals to replace it with office towers, and its legacy. Flinders Street Station is often thought of as a meeting place. Phrases like "meet me under the clocks" or "I'll meet you on the steps" are well-known examples of people meeting and gathering here. But long before the famous clocks were built, the area beneath Flinders Street Station was known as Naam Jap to the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. In 2018, excavations for Town Hall Station next to Young and Jackson uncovered approximately 300 Aboriginal artefacts, including stone tools which suggested the site was used for corroborees and other celebrations. I think this is a really fascinating and important start to the story today. Following European settlement, Melbourne was rapidly expanding. Businesses popped up along the river and increasing numbers of people settled here from around the world. The 1850s gold rush brought unprecedented wealth to the area and put enormous pressure on transport infrastructure. Well, infrastructure is probably a sophisticated term to describe it. According to Museums Victoria, back then, unpaved dirt streets often turned into knee-deep mud in winter and really dusty tracks in the summer, making transport by walking or animal-drawn carts very difficult. The advent of railways presented a new opportunity, a modern and efficient way of moving masses of people and goods where they needed to go. So, in the early 1850s, it was decided that a major rail terminus should be built along Flinders Street. This was a logical choice, as the ground was pretty flat, the spot was near the Yarra and on the southern edge of the city, and it was close to major businesses. The new station, then called the Melbourne Terminus, was opened in September 1854, but the station that was built was not the one we have today. It was a collection of weatherboard sheds. The terminus was the first city railway station in Australia, and the opening day saw the first steam train trip in Australia between the terminus and Port Melbourne, then known as Sandridge. The opening of the Melbourne terminus was a huge milestone, helping to promote the expansion of railways into other parts of Melbourne, Australia, and possibly beyond. The modest station buildings were expanded over the next 50 years to become an assorted collection of shops, ticket offices, footbridges and platforms. This growth reflected what was happening across Melbourne. New railway lines spread into the suburbs and regional Victoria, and passenger numbers were exploding. By 1865, the Melbourne Fish Market popped up on the southwest corner of Flinders and Swanston Streets. It was not a fancy building by any means. There was a large central chamber around 16 metres high, surrounded by stalls, an arcade, and fountains for washing fish. In 1892, the probably stinky fish market was moved further west into this beautiful building, though we sadly lost it in 1959 to redevelopment. One small part of the original station still survives today. In 1901, part of the original station roof was dismantled and relocated to Hawthorn Station, where it remains today, more than a century later. By the 1880s and 90s, Melbourne had become one of the wealthiest cities in the world. Grand buildings like the State Library and the Royal Exhibition Building were popping up around the city, and it made Flinders Street Station look a little inadequate. There are records of one design proposal from 1883 which never went ahead. You might have spotted this in my Southern Cross Station video, as the same print includes a design for Spencer Street Station. There's little information about this one, but if you happen to know more, please let me know in the comments. In 1899, the Victorian Railways announced an international design competition for a new Flinders Street Station. Architects from around Australia and the world were invited to submit ideas. The design needed to accommodate growing passenger numbers, provide modern railway facilities, include admin offices for Victorian Railways, and create a building that could demonstrate Melbourne's status as a prosperous city. If you've seen my previous videos, you'll know that around this time Melbourne was trying and succeeding at having an international reputation of wealth and opulence. 17 designs were submitted into the competition. It seems like a possible conflict of interest, but the winning entry came from two employees of Victorian Railways, architect James Fawcett and civil engineer H.P.C. Ashworth. Apparently neither of them were well known at the time. The design was named Green Light and they were awarded £500 of prize money. There was to be a large frontage spanning Flinders Street, a central dome on the corner of Flinders and Swanston Streets, and a clock tower overlooking Elizabeth Street. While I mentioned at the start of this video that the design was Edwardian, there were architectural influences from other styles all over the building. This has helped drive a legend that plans for Flinders Street Station were accidentally swapped with those intended for Mumbai's Chhatrapati Shivaji terminus. Historians have actually never found evidence that such a mix-up occurred, and in fact, the two stations were designed years apart by different architects. Any similarities are said to be superficial. I'll talk more about the station's design and features shortly. While the competition was held in 1899, construction of the new Flinders Street Station didn't start until September 1905. Even then, progress was apparently slow and the final product was very different to original plans. The railway commissioners were under intense scrutiny at the time. Just 15 years earlier, they had overseen the construction of the elaborate Maryborough Station, which some critics considered over the top. Determined to avoid the same criticism, they argued that Melbourne still deserved a grand central station worthy of the state's capital. Because the new railway headquarters at Spencer Street already provided office space for the railways, Flinders Street Station was initially designed with commercial offices for private tenants. This proved to be a very smart financial decision. Apparently rental income covered the interest on the construction loan within the first few years, and with occupancy remaining close to 100% for decades, those tenants became a significant source of revenue. Many people argue if the offices had been properly conserved, they could have continued providing a valuable source of income. Construction was awarded to Ballarat builder Peter Roger for £93,000, and it was an enormous undertaking. Materials included millions of locally made bricks, handmade tiles, bluestone, reinforced concrete, steel, and timber. This gave Flinders Street Station its distinctive colour scheme, and it stood out against Melbourne's stone buildings. Work began at the western end closest to Elizabeth Street before gradually moving towards the dome. By 1908, the project was well behind schedule. Roger's contract was terminated and another contractor was brought in to finish the job. Not everything from the original plans made it to reality. Cost overruns forced significant compromises. An elaborate arched iron and glass roof over the platforms, which would have cost £28,000, was abandoned so that the money could be diverted by adding a fourth floor to the main building for the Victorian Railways Institute, something I'll talk about shortly. Over the years, there have been repeated calls to complete the station as originally intended. The main portion of the building was completed in 1909, and the official opening was held in 1910, along with the opening of the Victorian Railways Institute. You might all be familiar with the ballroom, something I think was forgotten about for decades until it briefly returned to public attention in 2021 when Patricia Piccinini held her A Miracle Constantly Repeated exhibition there, and in 2022 when Roan's Time exhibition included use of the ballroom. In 1904, the Railway Commissioners established the Victorian Railways Institute to provide education, recreation and social opportunities for railway employees. This is why that extra floor was added to the station's design. When the Institute officially opened in 1910, what is now known as the ballroom was actually used as a lecture hall. though it also hosted dances, concerts, and social events for railway staff and the community. The institute aimed to improve the well-being of railway employees and boost morale following intense railway strikes in 1903. The ballroom wasn't the only part of the staff complex. Throughout the upper floors there were lecture rooms, gymnasiums, and even a 400-yard running track on the roof. Though as workplace needs changed throughout the 20th century, all of these spaces gradually fell into disuse, and many Melburnians like me had no idea they existed. Much of the decoration around Flinders Street Station can be attributed to James Fawcett, one of the architects. He produced over 70 designs for the Wunderlich Company, who supplied the pressed metal work in the station. His designs also featured in panelling of country and suburban trains, like the Tate trains, and it is presumed in many Edwardian houses around Victoria. He also produced the designs for stained glass windows around the station, which are probably one of my favourite features. If there is one feature almost every Melburnian associates with Flinders Street Station, it's the famous clocks above the main entrance. There are actually quite a few clocks here. There's a smaller clock above, there's an enormous clock tower looking down Elizabeth Street, and there are more inside the station. The Elizabeth Street clock tower actually played a big role in the railway network. It was built in 1907 by Melbourne clockmaker F. Ziegler, and it served as the master clock for the entire Victorian railway network, transmitting the correct time to stations across the state using telegraph signals. These clocks here actually predate the current station. They were imported from England in the 1860s for the original Flinders Street Station and were transferred to the new building when it opened in 1910. They show the departure times for Melbourne's suburban railway lines and were once an essential source of information. Back in the day, railway staff had to manually update them, making hundreds of adjustments throughout the day. It's possible the tradition of meeting under the clocks started before the current station was finished. During construction, there was a temporary booking office on the corner of Flinders and Swanston with the clocks above it. A photo in a newspaper from 1909 captioned "New Year's Day picnickers meeting under the clocks" suggests the tradition might have already been a thing. Platform 1 runs alongside the main station building, essentially along Flinders Street. Its eastern end, the part that goes underground, is now known as Platform 14. You'll often hear that Platform 1 is Australia's longest railway platform at around 708 metres. I kept coming across this when I was researching this video, but I couldn't find a reliable source that actually confirms it, so take it with a grain of salt. One forgotten feature is the station's milk dock. You might have seen it as you come into Flinders Street from Southern Cross. It looks almost like an abandoned shed. Fresh milk used to arrive daily by train from dairies around Victoria, before being unloaded into large metal cans. Railway staff would then wheel the cans down the dedicated ramp for distribution around the city. It used to have a roof, but apparently it was removed because it had asbestos, much like some of the offices in the main building. If this area was cleaned up and safe to operate, I think a cafe or a hospitality venue would be really cool here. Just a suggestion. Just west of the station is Banana Alley. In 1891, when the railway viaduct connecting Flinders Street and Spencer Street stations was opened, the arches beneath it were enclosed and divided into 33 different storage vaults. Their cool, dark conditions were perfect for ripening bananas. Infamously, hidden among the bananas were often spiders, rodents, and sometimes snakes. These days the bananas are long gone, but the name Banana Alley has stuck. Lastly, along Flinders Street are several shops, many occupying former booking offices, fruit stalls, and parcel offices, but others being original shop fronts. I had to shout out City Hatters right next to the front steps, as they've traded continuously from the station since 1910. How cool is that? Okay, settle in for a bit of a wild ride with this next section of the video. By the 1960s and 70s, many of Melbourne's grand Victorian and Edwardian buildings faced an uncertain future. This is a common theme among the older buildings I cover in my videos. Modern architecture was fashionable and there were limited budgets to maintain old buildings. Flinders Street Station was one of these old buildings, and it suffered from decades of deferred maintenance and decline. It was during this time that Flinders Street Station came dangerously close to demolition, with numerous proposals for office towers in its place. In 1963, then Premier Henry Bolte announced that air rights over Princess Bridge Station, which was opposite Flinders Street Station, would be sold. This would result in the infamous Princess Gate Towers, as well as a public plaza and new entrance to Princess Bridge Station. But part of this plan was also to extend the office buildings over the other side of Swanston Street, eventually replacing Flinders Street Station. Thankfully, this never happened. It's hard to even comprehend that this was a possibility, but it wasn't even long before another proposal was put forward. In 1972, another plan was revealed to build a huge complex of shops and offices over the station. However, many people strongly opposed this one. A special green ban by construction workers helped save the station. This was essentially a refusal by construction workers to perform any work on these projects, forcing developers and governments to abandon their plans. This helped lead to protection by the National Trust of Australia in 1976 and later state heritage listing in 1982. By the 1980s, major alterations would come to the concourse. This is the concourse we have today. Earlier concourses had wooden shops, brown panelling, and an asphalt floor with broken chains, paper clips, and lids of bottles fossilized into it. According to the National Trust, the inclusion of large and convenient public toilets in the original design was very rare at the time. But in the 1980s, the new concourse was built. Escalators and lifts were installed, removing the original ramps down to the platforms, and a new hospitality venue was added to overlook the river. Some changes were less obvious. It was around this time that, would you believe, the front steps were heated. While we're here, I thought I'd briefly mention another alteration made at Flinders Street Station. In 1955, the De Grave Street subway, now known as Campbell Arcade, opened under Flinders Street, creating a pedestrian subway connecting the station with De Grave Street. Campbell Arcade became a destination in its own right, and I talk about this more in my Campbell Arcade video. An international design competition was launched in November 2011 by then Premier Ted Baillieu, with the aim of finding the best design scheme to restore and rejuvenate Flinders Street Station. The competition jury included the likes of George Columbaris. According to this statement from Major Projects Victoria, the government was looking for the best ideas from around the world to re-energise the station, while making sure critical heritage values were maintained. Designs were expected to address the station's transport function, heritage requirements, and urban design and integration. The competition attracted some wild concepts, as you can see, and a winner was even announced, but it never progressed. I'm going to show you some more of the designs while I read out this perspective from the Melbourne urbanist about design competitions, which I tend to agree with. Design competitions have their risks. Designing a building to win a competition is not quite the same task as designing one strictly on the basis of fulfilling the brief. Competition favours ideas that stand out from the crowd. They favour high-impact visions. Sometimes the basic function, practicality, and financial viability of the building can be compromised. No hate to any of these entries, but I don't think any of them capture the essence of Flinders Street Station. I also don't know why they can't just finish the building as originally intended. I think that would be pretty neat. Oh, and please add a pedestrian scramble out the front of Flinders Street Station. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see the original station building finished, or if you think one of the competition designs should have been built. While that 2011 competition went nowhere, the future of Flinders Street Station took a more practical turn in 2015 when Premier Dan Andrews announced a $100 million restoration program. The works were extensive and took several years. For a time, the station building was hidden behind scaffolding. More than 4 million bricks were cleaned, repaired and repointed, and around 600 windows were inspected and restored. Where possible, original window frames were retained and fitted with new glazing, and damaged timber was carefully replaced using traditional carpentry techniques to preserve the building's historic character. You might be surprised to learn that the riverside facade is clad in zinc. This was all carefully restored as part of the project. It was during this restoration that the station got this nighttime lighting, as well as much needed upgrades to passenger information displays. It was here that the new feature signage and information screens, where each line had its own colour, were unveiled. Flinders Street Station sits at the centre of Melbourne's railway network and is arguably the city's most recognisable building. Almost every suburban rail line has either terminated here or passed through it. With more than 19 million passengers during 2024 and 2025, it's clear the station remains central to Melbourne's daily rhythm. When the City Loop opened in the 1980s, Flinders Street Station's role as the city's primary railway hub was reduced. For people like me, it's difficult to imagine what travelling into the city was like before the City Loop and the Metro Tunnel. But hopefully these photos can give you an idea of just how busy it was. Living here, I sometimes forget how remarkable this building really is. It's easy to focus on the negatives, like the crowded platforms, aging facilities, or, God forbid, the toilets. But when you stop and think about it, it's pretty extraordinary that a building over a century old still stands at the heart of the CBD, serving the very purpose it was designed for. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments and consider giving it a like or subscribing to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Ken and I make videos about history, infrastructure, architecture and the environment. Don't forget to check out my other videos. If you'd like to support the channel, there's a link below where you can buy me a coffee. It'd be much appreciated. See you in the next one.